Imagine waking up to the news that 70 Christians, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and innocent children were brutally beheaded inside their own church. This isn't a nightmare or a story from centuries past. This happened just recently in the Democratic Republic of Congo, yet most of us are only hearing about it now. Why? Where are the front-page headlines? Where is the global outrage and the flood of supportive social media posts? The contrast is striking when we look at other tragedies. In 2017, when a man ran into a group of Muslims near the Finsbury Park Mosque in London, killing one person and injuring 9 others, it made global headlines. CNN, BBC, The Guardian, nearly every major news outlet covered it extensively. The UK government released official statements and politicians worldwide spoke out against it. But 70 Christians beheaded? Almost nothing from major media outlets. Have we become so numb to the suffering of certain groups, are some lives deemed more newsworthy than others? To understand this tragedy, we must first understand where it happened. The Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, is an enormous country with about 105 million people. It's a land blessed with abundant natural resources but cursed by the greed these riches attract. Currently, the DRC is locked in a conflict with neighboring Rwanda over territory in the Kivu region. This area is rich in minerals, the very minerals used in our smartphones and other technologies we use every day. What most people don't know is that the DRC has historically been a Christian-majority nation, thanks to the dedicated missionaries who built schools, hospitals, and churches throughout the country in the late 19th century. The attackers belong to a group called the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, which is affiliated with ISIS. This group was founded by a man named Jamil Mukulu, who was once a Catholic but converted to Islam and embraced radical ideologies. The details of this attack are truly heart-wrenching. Early in the morning of February 12th, ADF militants stormed the homes of Christians, yelling for them to come outside. Families woke to the sound of gunfire and screaming, only to be dragged from their homes at gunpoint. They were kidnapped and forced to march with the militants for days, carrying the very items the attackers had stolen from them and others. Those who couldn't physically endure the journey were killed along the way. Eventually, the captives were taken to a Protestant church in eastern Congo. Once inside, they were tied up and tortured. Then, one by one, they were beheaded. Mothers, fathers, children, all slaughtered within what should have been a sanctuary of peace and worship. The bodies of over 70 victims, including women, children, and the elderly, were found inside the church the next day. Can you imagine the horror? Can you imagine the fear these faithful believers must have felt in their final moments? Did they cling to their faith even as they faced death? Psalm 23:4 reminds us, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." The geopolitical implications of this attack are significant. Some experts believe this violence is part of a larger strategy to destabilize the Democratic Republic of Congo. If the DRC government, under President Felix Tshisekedi, cannot protect its citizens, it may be forced to seek help from outside the country. This could potentially legitimize Rwanda's claims to the mineral-rich regions that it covets. One expert who spoke with Congolese people in the United States reported that they believe Rwanda is supporting these attacks, despite being a Christian nation itself, because the violence serves their strategic interests in gaining control of valuable mineral resources. How often do we see supposed Christians putting worldly gain above the sanctity of human life? Is this not a stark reminder that not all who claim the name of Christ truly follow his teachings? Tragically, this isn't an isolated incident. Anti-Christian violence is a growing problem across Africa. Groups like Boko Haram in Nigeria have been terrorizing Christian communities for years. Some experts warn that we may be witnessing the beginning of a jihad against Christians throughout North Africa. There are concerns that if this violence continues unchecked, and if Christians begin to fight back, we could see the eruption of a full-scale interreligious war across the continent. As followers of the Prince of Peace, how should we respond to such threats? Should we not be praying for both the persecuted and the persecutors? The media's silence on these atrocities reveals a troubling pattern of bias and selective reporting. As one expert pointed out, If the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, were responsible for these beheadings, it would have made the front page of the Washington Post and the New York Times, and every newspaper throughout the world. But because this is black-on-black violence, as he put it, nobody cares. A scholar named Virgil Hawkins wrote a book called Stealth Conflicts that documented this disparity in media coverage. He found that despite 5.4 million people dying in the Congo Civil War, there were only a few dozen newspaper articles or news segments about it. In contrast, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which had claimed perhaps 30,000 to 40,000 lives during the same period, received thousands of articles, more articles than there were people killed. Why such a difference? One reason is accessibility. The Congo is a vast, sometimes dangerous country for reporters, whereas places like Israel are relatively safe and convenient for Western journalists. But there's also what some call an anti-Christian bias among those who control major media outlets. Tools like ground news are becoming increasingly valuable for those seeking the full picture. This service gathers articles from over 50,000 sources and shows how stories are being covered across the political spectrum. For the Congo massacre, only 46 sources had covered it at the time of recording, and only 3 of those were left-leaning publications. Even more telling, the right-wing sources correctly identified the victims as Christians who were beheaded, while 2 of the 3 left-leaning sources referred to them merely as missing people. Such disparities in reporting reveal how our understanding of world events can be shaped or distorted by the sources we rely on. Does this not call us to be more discerning about the information we consume? As Proverbs 14:15 counsels, "The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going." To understand the roots of this violence, we must look at the history of Islam in the DRC. For most of its history, Congo was a Christian majority nation, thanks to missionaries who built schools, hospitals, and churches in the late 19th century. But after independence in 1960, something changed. Islamic communities, once restricted, were now free to organize and expand. This set the stage for the rise of radical groups like the ADF. Many of these extremist groups justify their attacks on Christians using certain verses from the Quran. Quran 9:29 says to fight those who do not believe in Allah, while Surah 95 goes even further, ordering followers to kill the unbelievers wherever you find them. Some interpretations of these texts have led a small percentage of Muslims to actively target and kill Christians because they believe they are commanded by Allah to do so. How do we respond to ideologies that promote violence in the name of religion? How do we stand firm for truth while still showing Christ-like love to all? The global pattern of Christian persecution becomes clear when we look at certain maps. One map shows the places where Christians face the highest risk of persecution and death simply for being Christian. Another map shows where Muslim populations are highest, and a third shows where the most terrorist attacks occur. When these maps are compared, the overlap is striking. The areas with the highest Muslim populations often correlate with regions where Christians face the greatest persecution, and these same areas frequently experience terrorist attacks. The connection is undeniable. Most of the world's terrorism targeting Christians comes from those claiming to be Muslim. Yet despite this clear pattern, many media outlets and political leaders hesitate to address the ideological roots of these attacks. Rather than condemning the extremist interpretations that fuel such violence, they often remain silent or worse label those who speak out as intolerant or Islamophobic. We must not fear to call sin by its right name. Should we not speak truth with love, standing firm against ideologies that promote violence while still respecting the dignity of all people? In light of these sobering realities, what can we do? First, we must increase awareness. Share this information with others, not to spread fear or hatred, but to shed light on the plight of our persecuted brothers and sisters. Second, we should think critically about the media we consume, recognizing bias and seeking out diverse perspectives. Third, we must support efforts to protect religious minorities worldwide, regardless of faith. And finally, we must pray. Pray for the persecuted, pray for peace, and yes, pray even for those who persecute others. As we conclude, let us remember the words of Jesus in Matthew 5:10-12. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. May we stand in solidarity with those who suffer for their faith, and may we, like those faithful martyrs in the Congo, remain true to our convictions even in the face of opposition. Will you be one of those men or women who cannot be bought or sold, who is true and honest in their inmost soul, who does not fear to call sin by its right name, whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole? Who will stand for the right though the heavens fall? The world desperately needs such people today. A sign of the end times is happening in Israel. Click here to watch it now.